We are going to do the 7C word problems, some of the hardest ones that we'll see in this class. We're going to be using the distance equals rate times time formulas. Now there's three versions of it. This is the standard form, D equals R times T. We're going to mostly use this one, time is equal to distance over rate. And if all we're really doing, if D equals R times T, if I solve for the letter T, I would have to divide each side by R, and that's why D over R is right there. And if we had solved for rate, it was distance over time. Most of the time, we're going to use this formula on these questions. But we're always going to start with the distance equals rate times time, and then we're going to solve for what's missing. So, this first question, we're going to do it two different ways because I want you to see that both ways work. So, we're going to start off by creating a chart. It's always distance equals rate times time. And we have Jean who is skiing, and we have Richard skiing. So we'll fill out this little chart, make a little chart here. Now, Jean cross-country skis 5 kilometers slower than Richard. Okay, so Jean is the slower skier. Okay, so Richard does X. Jean is 5 miles per hour slow, or kilometers per hour, X minus 5. So now it says in the same time, it takes Jean to ski 42. Okay, well, Jean's distance is 42. Richard can ski 57. So now it says in the same time. Now if we look up here, time is equal to distance over rate. So this distance is 42 over Jean's rate is X minus 5. Now Richard's distance was 57 and his was over X. Now since they're the same time, those two fractions must be equal to each other. So what I do is I just make 42 over X minus 5 equal 57 over X. Now it's great, this is just one fraction against another fraction, and if you remember, we just cross multiply here for both ways here. So 42 times X, 42X equals 57 times X minus 5. And so what I got to do is I got to multiply this out here. So it's 42x equals 57x minus 285. I just did 57 times negative 5. And I did it early, so I've already written out I did in the calculator earlier. Please get out your calculator and verify. So I want to get the x's on the same side. So 42x minus 57x is going to be negative 15x equals, these cancel, negative 285. I divide each side by negative 15, and I get x equals 19. Now if you notice up here, Richard is x. This belongs to Richard. So that means Richard is 19. Now Jean is 19 minus 5. So Jean is 14 kilometers per hour. Now, I could have set this up slightly different. I'm going to write a little bit smaller here on the left-hand side here. I'm going to do it in red as well to distance it. So if I do Jean and Richard again, I'm going to do D equals R times T. Now let's say the distances are the same, so 42 and 57. But instead of making Richard the base one, I'm going to make Jean go X. Now if Jean is 5 miles per hour slower, then that means Richard is 5 kilometers per hour faster. And then I can still do d over t, so that's 42 over x. This is 57 over x plus 5. Again, I just make those two fractions equal to each other because it's the same time. So if I do 42 over x equals 42 over x equals 57 over x plus 5, and then I'm just going to cross multiply again, aren't I? 57x equals 42 times x plus 5. 57x equals 42x plus 210. So I subtract 210, nope, sorry. Oops. Don't want to subtract 210 over, do I? I want to subtract the 42x over. So I get 15x equals 210. I divide each side by 15, and I get x equals 14. So in other words, my x this time is 14, but remember, over here, x is with Gene, isn't it? And so I would get the 14 here, and I would do 14 plus 5, and I would get the same exact answers. It just depends on how you see the 5 miles per hour difference. Since it said 5 kilometers slower, my first instinct is to do x minus 5. But if you do want to reverse it and avoid the negative signs, you can do that. Both ways work. All right, question number 1 done. There's only 4 word problems, but these are tough. All right, so now we're doing Bob drove 60 miles during a rainstorm. The return trip was in perfect weather, was finished at double the speed. So we're going in a rainstorm and coming back in sunny weather. Again, I'm assuming sunny weather is perfect. So we're going to do distance equals rate times time. So now the distance was 60 miles. Now the return trip, that implies they have the exact same distance. Now the return trip was finished at double the speed. So the rain, they were going a little slower, so it went x miles per hour. Then double speed, that means it went 2x. And again, my distance, if I solve it, it's always distance over rate. So I'm going to have 60 over x, then 60 over 2x. Now, if you notice, 60 over 2x reduces to 30 over x. That is a very helpful thing. Anytime we can reduce fractions, please take advantage of it. Now, if we're looking at, if we drive faster, that means it's going to take less time. Now, since there's a 2-hour time difference, this is the shorter time because this is when I was driving faster. So it's 30 over x, then I add the 2 hours, and that should be equal to the longer trip. Because in the rain, it's going to take longer. So I do the faster trip plus 2, since there's a 2 hours time difference, equals the longer time. Now, unfortunately, I can't cross multiply here because I don't just have one fraction equaling another fraction. So I got to get rid of the fractions. Now what's nice is the common denominator is just x. So really I want to multiply everything by x. Now when I distribute the x to the first one, the x's cancel and I'm just left with 30. Now x times 2 is just 2x. And on the other side the x's cancel again, so I'm equal to 60. So they just go away. So now this is a really nice problem, isn't it? Minus 30 minus 30, 2x equals 30. I divide by 2, x equals 15. Now remember, if I go back up here, this x is in the rainstorm, and that's when I was going. So my speed going was 15. My return trip was twice the speed. So 2 times 15 is 30 kilometers per hour. They really like this question, and I think in the homework, the quiz, they give a snowstorm and a rainstorm. And you go faster in the rain than the snow. But you will see this question again. All right. Now we got Tori and Emilio's motorboats travel at the same speed. All right. So we have Tori and we have Emilio. And again, we're going to do distance equals rate times time. draw my little chart here. I always need to draw these charts to keep it straight. Okay? Alright, so now, they travel at the same speed. Okay? So their X's are the same for rates. Now, Tori pilots her boat for 40 kilometers, so her distance is 40. Emilio continues for another 3 hours, traveling a total of 100 kilometers. All right, so there's 100 kilometers. Now, again, their times are going to be the same. It's distance over rate, so 40 over x, 100 over x. So Emilio traveled for 3 hours extra. So that means Tori's time of 40 over x, then Emilio traveled another 3 hours, and that should equal Emilio's time. And again, it's just like the last question, where we have the three fractions and we cannot just make them equal to each other. So what we got to do is we got to multiply it out, or we got to find the common denominator, multiply it by that. The common denominator is x, so we're going to multiply each side by x. Remember, when I do it to the first one, the x's cancel, so I'm left with 40. When I do the x times the 3, it's plus 3x equals, the x's cancel, 100. And again, it works out very nicely, doesn't it? Minus 40, minus 40, I get 3x equals 60, divided by 3, x equals 20. Now remember, this is the rate, so they were going 20 kilometers per hour. But here's the trick part of this question. It says it took Tori blank hours to navigate the 40 kilometers. It's not asking for the speed, it's asking for the time. So now remember, if I look at Tori, isn't Tori's time 40 over x? So x is equal to 20, so it's really 40 over 20, which is 2. So it took Tori 2 hours to navigate the 40 kilometers. Now, if they had asked for how long Emilio did, well, it would be 2 hours plus 3. So Emilio would go for 5 hours. Now, that question was not asked. This is what I need to answer. Okay? So sometimes it is a speed, but this time they really wanted the time. The time is distance over rate. Okay. Alrighty, and the last question. These are the ones that you're actually going to like the best. This is the easiest of the three. When you're doing work questions, they always add up to 1 because you're completing a whole job. Let's say I do half of a job and you do half of a job. That means we've completed the whole job. Now, people don't always work at the same rate. And so when we look at this question, Tony can weed the garden in 3 hours. So his work rate is 1 over 3. Because in 1 hour, he will get 1/3 of the job done. If it takes Maria 4 hours to do it, in 1 hour she can get 1/4 of the job done. But all we do in these questions is, if it's t over a plus t over b, the t is the time together. So we don't know how long it's going to take them together. So all I do is the 1/4, I change this to t plus t over 3, because they work the same amount of time, equals 1. And there's lots of different ways of doing this. You have the calculator that will help you out. But again, the common denominator for this is just 12. So I could multiply everything by 12. And I would do 12 divided by 4, that's 3t. Then I do here, 12 divided by 3 is 4t equals 12. So 7t equals 12. I divide by 7. And I get t equals 12 over 7 hours, or if I change it to a mixed number, it's 1 5/7 hours. I believe they will take this answer or this answer. If you want to leave it in improper, that's a one less step, and that works fine for me. There will definitely be different questions on this. We will definitely go over them again, but as you can see, that's way better than the other ones. You just have to remember the t over a plus t over b equals 1. The A and the B are just the work rates of this. Since Maria works 4, I put the 4 in for the A. Tony does 3 hours, I just put the 3 in for B. And so it's just t over 4 plus t over 3 equals 1. It's always the same startup of these questions. Now, sometimes the numbers get a little crazy, but again, you have a calculator. The calculator will do all the crazy numbers. That ends 7C, and I think the distance, rate, times problem, those are the really hard ones. And so we will go over those in class, and we will ask lots of questions, I hope.